Hello, this is Alan Elliott, and this is SAS Essentials, Mastering SAS for Data Analytics, 3rd edition. This is Chapter 8, Controlling Output Using ODS. In this chapter, you'll be able to specify ODS output formats and destinations, specify an ODS style, select specific tables for output, capture information from ODS tables, use ODS graphics, use traffic lighting to highlight selected values, and create a PowerPoint slide using ODS. As usual, if you'd like to follow along with these examples, please download the files from this file location. So let's get started. First, let's answer the question, what is ODS? ODS stands for Output Delivery System. It's a method for controlling the output from SAS procedures. ODS began with version 8 and continues with added enhancements as time goes along. Prior to SAS 9.3, SAS output appeared in the output window. This output listing was a monospaced typewriter font with no graphics. And there are a few options that allow you to control the look of the listing. However, beginning with 9.3, the default output is an HTML output that we'll look at in more detail later. So let's look at section 8.1 from the text, specifying the ODS output format and destination. So the SAS ODS is set up so that you can turn on or initiate output to some specific output format. Once the output format has been initiated, SAS procedures then send information to that output format. You can send output from more than one procedure to the output stream before you close it. And the way that works is using this syntax. ODS and then output destination, that's a name that we're going to look at in just a second, and then possibly some options. So that initiates the output to that destination. And then you can use as many procedures as you want to. When you're finished outputting to that destination, you use a similar command, but this time ODS output destination and then the word close, semicolon. For example, here is an example of how to output to an RTF format, which is rich text format, which is output to word processors, general word processors. So I would say ODS RTF, and then I would put SAS code that creates some sort of output, and then I would close it by saying ODS RTF close. Here's a listing of some of the various output formats. ODS listing is the old style format, and then we have HTML, or hypertext markup language we'll talk about in a little bit, and the rest of these, we're going to mention them as we go along. Notice one thing is that the ODS file location is listed as body equal, and most of them are listed as file equal. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but body equal is needed for certain circumstances. All right, first let's look at ODS output HTML. As I mentioned, it's called the hypertext markup language. This is the language used by most internet pages. So if you and this is the default. So the default output by SAS actually creates output that can easily be copied and pasted into a web page. But there are other kinds of things that we can also paste it into, like Microsoft Word and so forth. Listing is an old style SAS format that used sort of a monoscale or monospaced font, sort of like a typewriter font, and it was used in early versions of SAS. The portable document format, or PDF, which is widely used to distribute documents by email or internet downloads. So we could use PDF document. It requires the free Adobe Reader or similar program to read the document, but that's pretty easy. It's almost on everyone's computer. So oftentimes we create a PDF document because it allows us to control what the output will actually look like. if we create documents in Word or some other kind of reader, it may actually look different depending on the version, etc., of the program that they use it on. However, when you create a PDF document, it should look the same on Windows, Mac, Unix, Linux, and even on your phone. Rich text format, or RTF, is a common language for word processors. Now, although most people probably use Microsoft Word, RTF is also readable in many other kinds of word processors that are out there. Here's a description of some other ones that I'm not going to go into detail, but PostScript is a printer language. PCL is another printer language. PowerPoint, you're maybe familiar with, is Microsoft PowerPoint format. Excel, Word, extensible markup language, XML, and TagSet, Excel XP, and there's other ones called things like Format and the wireless markup language. We'll use some examples showing some of these as we move along. All right, so let's look at an example of an output destination. For example, to send data to a PDF file, you could use the following syntax: ODS, PDF, and then file equal whatever file name we want it to go to. In this case, some Windows path, filename.pdf. Now notice that the extension for the file we want it to go to should match the type of destination we're choosing. So it would be something like ODS PDF file equals /SAS data /myoutput.pdf. Notice we're using ODS PDF, and the output extension for the file name is .pdf. We could also not specify an output name. If we just use ODF PDF and then some SAS code and then close it, it's going to output to the default PDF viewer. All right, let's look at another one, ODS RTF. This is the rich text format, which is the generic word processing format. And again, we say ODS RTF and then a similar close. Now again, if we don't specify a file for it to go to, it's just going to go to whatever it thinks is our default word processor. So for instance, if you have Microsoft Word load installed on your computer, then when you do this, it's very likely that Microsoft Word will come up with the output in a Word file. Now, I will mention that if you do this and try to run it again, it may have an error message that says can't output to Word because it's already open. So oftentimes, when we run things like this, we need to close the program that it outputs to before trying it again. Otherwise, it may cause an error. All right, some important default settings related to ODS. Starting with SAS 9.2, the default location became HTML, as I mentioned earlier. As of 9.4, the output defaults are as follows. So the output is HTML, the style is HTML blue, and we'll look at the styles in just a moment. ODS graphics is on, again, we'll talk about that later, and listing, which is the old style output format, is closed. And this is an important thing. If you close HTML with ODS HTML close, SAS may not produce any other output there. So since it's the default one, we typically don't have to say ODS HTML unless we want to send it to a specific file. But if you do that and then you close it, and then you try to run SAS again without any ODS output specified, then you may get an error message that there's no output destination open. If that happens, you can reset the default options with this command, ODS preferences, /. So if you're using ODS HTML in a program, it's often good to put this ODS preferences as the last command in your file. So just to review this, because it comes up all the time, what do you do if your output is not showing up in the results viewer? You probably closed it somehow, and so you simply enter ODS preferences, /, or you can always end and restart. But that's a simple way to do it. Just run that one line and it will reset the defaults. All right, now I mentioned style a little bit earlier. And ODS style is a way for us to choose the way that SAS ODS output looks. And So each style is based on some theme or format appropriate to a specific purpose. For example, the journal style format outputs in a black and white tables and etc. that is appropriate maybe for inclusion in a journal article. So for instance, you might say style equal and then style type. Now, how do we know what the names of the style types are? Well, we're going to look at that in just a minute, but here's an example of how you would use that. ODS, RTF, style equal journal, then whatever SAS procedures you have, and then close it. You can see a listing of the available styles, and I would encourage you to do this on your own because it does change over time. I'm going to show you what it gave at the time of this recording, but it may change over time. So if I run this proc template list styles and then run, I get this ODS styles table. And you can see there's a number of different styles, several different journal styles. You might have to match it with what the journal is expecting. You notice that you'll have fancy printer and Excel output and moonflower and all sorts of things. Seaside. So you can choose, you can play with those and choose one that has the kind of output you want. You notice on the second to the last one on the left column is HTML blue, which again is the default it uses for HTML. All right, so let's specify ODS output style with in this example 8.1. Open up the file ods1.sas and you'll see that this is the text or the code that you get. We're creating a data called test from some data. We're giving it a title, ODS Word example. And so now we have ODS Word file equal, and now we have the name of a file, // data ods.docx. So we're going to create a Word file. And then we say proc means max des equal to with some variables and then run. So we could put as many procs as we want in there, but we just this one for an example. And then we say ODS Word close. Now I have down there at the bottom ODS preferences, not because I needed it this time, but just it's a good practice to put it in there in case you happen to close the default ODS output. So where does the output go from this program? This is the output in Microsoft Word. So it creates this Word format. This is just a Microsoft Word table. So from this table that's now in Word, you could do a number of things to it. You can highlight values, edit things, edit labels, and whatever you want to do, delete columns. Anything you can do in Word now you can do in this table. We could also add a style option to the code by adding the words style equal festivals at the end of the ODS Word command. Notice here at the top. Now if I rerun this with the new festival style listed, here I have my two pieces of output. The first one was the original output that appeared in Word, and then I have a similar output called festival style. And notice, but of course, they're the same numbers, but the color scheme is a little bit different. So you can again play around with the styles and find one that you like. All right, now let's look at creating PDF output as another example. So here I'm going to create a file. First of all, open up ods2.sas. I'm reading in some data and calling it data test. ODS PDF. Notice that I'm using ODS PDF and the extension on the name of the file I'm creating is ods.pdf. So those have to match. Then I'm doing a regular proc means as I've done before, and I close ODS PDF close when I'm finished the procs that I'm going to use. In this case, again, I'm using the style called statistical. And these are the results that I get. Again, it looks very similar to what I got before. You know, the gray, the background is gray, and so on. Now, this actually typically appears in your SAS output screen, but it also created the file called ods.pdf on your hard drive, where we located it to the // data /ods.pdf. So you should be able to go out there. Then you could open up that file in Adobe Reader or some other program, or you can email it to someone. Now let's look at using ODS to select specific output tables. So SAS procedures allows us to output a lot of information. When we do a proc something, SAS may produce one table, it may produce 10 or 15 tables, but oftentimes we don't really want all those tables, particularly like say if we're going to do the same analysis on 50 different variables or something like that. We don't want 500 tables to look at. So we can limit the number of tables that SAS outputs for a specific proc. And the way that we do that is really a two-step thing. First, we have to know what the name of the table is, and then we have to tell SAS which tables to use. To find out the name of the tables, we use ODS trace on and then ODS trace off. So we start with ODS trace on, do proc whatever we are looking at, and then ODS trace off. Now what that produces, it produces our normal output, but it also produces the names of the tables that are output. And so then we can use that information in an ODS select statement. This is a second run of the same proc. And this time we say ODS select, name the tables we want to output, and then proc whatever we did previously. So this is what it looks like. Open up the file called ods3.sas. And you can see here I'm opening and creating a table called dataset called table. And now I have, before I do my proc freak, I have ODS trace on. Then I have a proc freak that's going to create a chi-square analysis. And then I have ODS trace off. Now I happen to know that this is going to create 3 tables, but I don't want all those 3 tables. So how do we handle that? Well, when we run this program, we see that it gives us the names of the 3 tables: crosstab freaks, chi-square, and Fisher's exact. This is in the log file. So when you run this and you say, well, where is this information? It's in the log file. Go look at it there, and you'll see it gives you the names of the tables. Now I can use the select statement now that I know the names of the tables. And before my proc freak, again, this is the same analysis where I did the proc trace, ODS trace. So I say ODS select, and then the 2 names of the tables, crosstab freaks and chi-square. I'm telling it these are the only tables I want you to output. And so the tables on the right are the ones that it outputs and not the final table. There's also a command called ODS exclude, which just does the opposite. ODS exclude lists the names of the tables you want it to exclude. There's some other steps in this analysis, so go ahead and complete those within the text. Okay, now let's look at section 8.4, going deeper, capturing information from ODS tables. So now that we know the names of ODS tables that are being output by specific procedures, we can do some other things with those tables. One of the things we can do is to output the information in those tables to an actual SAS data set. So instead of just seeing it on the screen, we can capture that information in a data set and then use it for some other reason. And the way we do that is, again, with an ODS statement. ODS output, the name of the table. For instance, we knew summary was a table name from proc means. And then output data set name is the name of the data set we want to output that information to. So open up the program called ods5.sas. And here we see we're creating a data set called weight, or WT. And we have the trace on, proc means, and trace off. Now when we run this program, we get this output in log that tells us the name of the program, or the name of the table created by means, is summary. Now again, you know, once you know the names of these tables, you don't have to do the trace on all that often. Once you know these tables, you can just use them. But if you don't know the names of the tables, then use that ODS trace on and off. But here we know the name of the table is summary from proc means. So I'm going to use that information, open up ODS6, and again we have the data set weight. And in this case, I'm going to create a file. So before I do the proc means again, I'm going to say ODS output summary equals stats. And remember, the summary is the name of the table it creates, and stats now is the name of the table I want it to write that information as a data set. So the summary is the visual data we see on the screen, but stats is going to actually be saved in a data set. So here we see the output as it appears on the screen, where we see we have the variables or statistics for the variable weight, n, mean, standard deviation, and so on. Now let's look at what it created on the hard drive. In this case, it created a SAS data set with that same information formatted a little differently. It's all in one record. And again, this is a SAS data set called stats. And look at the names of the variables. It's weight underscore n, weight underscore mean. So it took each statistic and added weight underscore to it. So now we know If I want the mean of weight, it's weight underscore mean. If I want the standard deviation of weight, it's weight underscore standard deviation. So now I have a data set with all of the various statistics that I calculated using proc means. Now, let's do something with that. We can combine the original data set, called WT, and the stats data set that contains the statistics using this procedure here, where we say weight diff. I'm going to create weight diff as a new data set weight, which is my original data set, and then I'm going to use this command if n underscore equal 1, then set equals stats. So what that says is if it's the first record of the stats data set, then combine it with the original data set weight. So what I'm doing is taking both of those data sets, WT and stats, and combining them into one data set called WT diff. And here is a program that will do that. So open up ODS7.SAS, and you can see where I have created this new data set called WT diff from the two data sets. Now that I have all that data into one data set, let's do something with it. So I have a calculation I'm going to create here called diff equal weight, which was from the original data set, minus weight mean, which is the mean of the weights from the second data set. So now that they're together, I can use them in a calculation. Then I'm going to use that calculation to create a z-score. A z-score is the diff divided by the standard deviation. So I've created this new data set called WT diff. Now I'm going to print out information from that data set and see what I get. Okay, this is the results of the combined data set. And we can see, I haven't produced all of the columns here, but just showing you some that are relevant. So we see the column weight, that was the original data. And then the next two columns are part of the statistics that were created. And these are in the stats data set, the mean weight and the standard deviation of weight. And then we calculated two values, diff and z. So we can see that diff is, for instance, in the first observation, it's 64 minus 62.75. That's the mean. Notice that I read in the first record of that database called stats, and it just replicates the same value there. So the mean of the data set for weight is going to be the same for all records, obviously, as is the standard deviation. So if I subtract weight and weight mean, I get 1.25. If I divide by the standard deviation, I get 0.139, and so on. Now you could now you have a z-score, and you could use this for various things. For instance, if you have a long data set, maybe you could look at create this kind of z-score, look for values above 3 or below 3, below -3. That might give you an indication of extreme values or some sort of outliers. Now let's look at using ODS graphics from SAS procedures. So ODS graphics refers to graphs that are created from SAS procedures. And although ODS graphics have been around for a while, for several SAS versions, the graphs only recently began appearing automatically in some procs. Now, there's a caveat with that, that I found at least, and that is if I'm dealing with a huge data set, a couple 100,000 for instance, and running a proc that creates an automatic graph, this could slow SAS down depending on your computer and so forth. I can temporarily turn off these automatic graphs by saying ODS graphics close, then doing whatever procedures I want, and then turn it back on using ODS graphics on. It's just something that you might want to look at if your graphs are slowing you down a lot. Okay, you can also turn graphs on and off in a dialog box by going to Tools, Options, Preferences, and the Results tab, and then clicking on the checkbox there. All right, so let's open up the file called attest.sas and just take a look at it. Note that no plots are requested in this code. However, when we run the code, we see that some plots were actually created. These are what I call the free plots. And so I won't talk about what these plots are. We'll look at that more in a chapter where we talk about t-tests. But nevertheless, it gives us some free plots. So, however, there are some procedures that have plots, but they don't automatically occur. You have to request them. And this is an example of that. Open up ODS 8.sas, and notice this is a proc freak, where I'm asking for doing some tables on the variable called status. Now when I run this code, no graphs are produced. However, if I change the table statement to table status and then add /plots equal freq plot, so I'm requesting a specific plot, and then rerun it, then I get this nice plot below. And again, we'll talk about proc freq later on in another chapter. Let me show you what I mean by the flyover. So here I have my output in SAS. If I move my cursor on top of one of these values, notice there's a little pop-up that says severity rating. That's what I ask it to do. So I can do anything I want to there. Notice over males, there's nothing there. But if I move my cursor over one of the values here that I have indicated, I can. It has this pop-up that tells me what that means. So that's what that flyover does. Okay, let's look at this section 8.6, creating a PowerPoint slide. In this case, we're going to be using Gmaps to show you how to do it. This is hands-on example 8.6. So open up the program file ods10.sas. Now notice here, I'm opening up ODS by saying ODS PowerPoint and giving it a file name, pop.pptx. And then I'm going to do a proc called proc Gmap. And this is going to create a map of the United States according to some population information from 2019. Also notice that I don't really have the ODS PowerPoint closed down here. Instead, I'm showing you that you could say ODS _all _close, which would close any ODS that happens to be open. And I'm also including the ODS preferences just for good programming practices. Also, I might just want to mention that in the proc map, I'm looking at the population, and I'm also using the ID state so that the program knows how to separate the information by state. So when I run this, I get a PowerPoint slide, and PowerPoint will open up if you have it on your computer, and this information will then be in your PowerPoint slide. So this is shows actually two different cool things you can do with SAS. One is create a map, and there are many maps out there in SAS. I've just chosen this one because it's easy to use and most people would be familiar with it. And also this population file that contains some population information from 2019. And again, you can easily see maybe what are the most populous states and which are the least populous states. So anyway, this gives you an example of how you could create a PowerPoint slide. Now you can create a PowerPoint slide from anything, not just Gmaps. You could do it with proc means or proc freq or any procedure that you want to use, and you can create capture the graphs that are created. So again, it's a way to get your information quickly into PowerPoint from SAS. Now there's some extended ODS features that are used in a proc called proc template, where you can modify a lot of these customized pieces of information in ODS. However, this is sort of beyond the scope of the book, but I just wanted to show you that it's out there. We can also store the components of any ODS report in something called proc document. And again, all of this is a little bit beyond the scope of this book, but you can use the SAS documentation to figure that out if you want to. As a bonus, however, we have included these quick reference guides to ODS that you can download from this website. So what this gives you is the ability to have a quick reference to all or most of the information that we just covered in this tutorial. Print this out two-sided or however you want to do it, and that will provide you a quick look at how to do some of the things using ODS. All right, well, this is the end of this chapter. In the next chapter, we're going to be looking at an introduction to proc SQL. So I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next tutorial. Thanks.